Welcome to Free Marketing Fridays. I'm going to give you some actionable advice in about 15 minutes because we all need to work smarter and not harder. No sales pitches. I'm not going to ask you to join some type of a paid community or buy a course or anything like that. This is just me teaching what I know, giving back to the community in a way. So today we're going to be talking about value propositions. So you've got a value proposition and it probably says something like, we help this type of company achieve this vague outcome through our generic approach. The problem is every one of your competitors also has the same thing, and it's probably just kind of splayed across your homepage hero section, right? So it feels really boring and framework-y. And if it does, then it probably means that your value proposition was written from the inside out by people who know your product really well and know your company really well, but maybe don't know your customers very well. So today I'm going to break down what actually makes a value proposition unique, why the ones built in conference rooms with 6 different key stakeholders always end up sounding generic and meh, and how to use your customer data to write one that your competitors literally can't copy. So let's get to it. We haven't met before. My name's Sunny Hunt. I'm the Chief Customer Nerd here at Hunt Interaction. My work typically lives at the intersection between revenue generation, customer insights, and customer experience. I've been doing stuff like this for about 20 years. I've worked with all these companies and more specifically on their customer growth challenges. And the things that they typically have in common is that they have little success gaps in their customer journey, which I then identify and help them fill. So let's talk about what a value proposition is not. It is not a tagline. It's not just do it. It's not a mission statement that starts with, we believe, blah, 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 blah. That's a mission statement. Value proposition is not a list of features, and it is not a paragraph that extols the values of, that extols the virtues of all of the values that you and your company hold, as well as your founder's story. All of these have their place, but this is not a value proposition. A tagline may grab and hold your attention, but it doesn't tell you why your audience should care. Here's one thing that a lot of teams don't realize. You can and often should have multiple different value propositions. Your company level value proposition usually will sit in like the homepage hero section or the top section of your homepage on the website. It's the first thing that a visitor sees. It's usually above the fold. There's no scrolling required. It's just there. It's in your face. And it needs to be immediately clear to your specific buyer that what you are selling is for them. But you can also have value propositions for different product lines or different service verticals or even different buyer segments because different buyers value different things. Your company level value proposition is the umbrella. It speaks to your broadest fit buyer. But if you have a product or service line with a very distinctive buyer who has a distinctive problem, that buyer probably deserves their own value proposition on their own landing page, their own product page, their own campaign, what have you. And it's a value proposition that speaks to specifically what they need in their language with their outcome front and center. And this isn't brand inconsistency by having multiple value propositions because they all need to tie together under that umbrella. It's relevance, and relevance converts. Value propositions tend to fail or really just not do their job when one or more of these things happen. And then you become completely indistinguishable from every single competitor who is in your category. The internal teams are just way too close to the product without any daily customer exposure. They may be really, really great at their jobs, but if they don't have exposure to customers or that customer data, they're gonna struggle. Value propositions fail when they're built by committee and they're massaged and refined to death. So all you end up with is like this really boring vanilla pudding when you originally set out to make this amazing chocolate souffle. They just get optimized to death. They fail when you focus on the company first and what the company does instead of the value that your customer actually gets. You basically are weeing all over your value proposition. And if it's generic enough that applies or could be swapped out from a whole list of competitors in the same space that you're at. Here are 3 hero sections from competing project management platforms. This is exactly what I'm talking about. They are not the same company. And unless you see the logo or you're very familiar with these particular platforms, you're probably going to struggle to figure out which one is from which company. And I'm really sorry if you were one of the copywriters who originally worked on these value propositions or these hero sections for your homepage. You got optimized to death. I'm sorry about that. But these are examples of value propositions that are capital M messy. They succeed in that they tell you exactly what they do, who they do it for, and the value that customers can expect, but they are all so similar that they could be swapped out and no one would know the difference. There are 4 things that your value proposition has to do. It has to be specific to a buyer, not businesses or teams, a specific person with a specific problem. The more clearly the buyer sees themselves in it, the harder it is for a competitor to steal. It has to name a real outcome, not a feature. Automated reporting is a feature, but your team stops arguing about which numbers are right is an outcome. Outcomes come from your customers and features come from your product roadmap. That's the difference between those two. And it has to use the language of your customers, the language they actually use, not the language that your product team uses, not strict adherence to the tone and voice guide that's adhered to your brand. This is the biggest differentiator and the thing that AI cannot do for you. ChatGPT is going to give you some polished professional language that sounds like every other company. Your customers are going to give you very specific and probably slightly awkward, but 100% accurate phrases that make the prospect say, hey, yeah, that's exactly the problem that I have. And your value proposition has to be unique. Your competitors just can't copy and paste it. Again, if you can swap your company name in for a competitor's name using the same value proposition, it probably still works, but it's not differentiated, and you should probably start over and add some more uniqueness to it. There is only one way to make your value proposition unique, and that is to use data that's unique to you and your company. And it comes from your customers. You do not have the same customer set that every single one of your competitors have. There is something unique about your customers and why they chose you over your competitors. Use that, and you have to extract that and use it and reflect it back to your customers. Here's the thing where most value proposition rewrites go wrong. They start with a blank doc and then a brainstorm instead of using customer data. So what you need to know is you need to know why your customers actually chose you, not good product, good support, the specific moment when they decided, yep, we're going to pick you. And what outcome or value do they talk about when they describe you to somebody else? What words do they say? Check your customer reviews. Those are actually really important. Check your referrals. Ask for referrals. You also need to know what problem they were trying to solve when they started looking for a solution like yours. What had they already tried that just didn't work for them? It could be like we were using an Excel spreadsheet and just didn't work for us. We have to level up to something that's more sophisticated that more people can actually use. Okay, great. That is the specific problem or that one point where they were struggling with something that forced them to go look for something else. And then what do they value or desire most that they didn't expect to get? Understand what that is. You can pull all of this data from customer interviews, surveys designed around buying decisions, your sales call recordings, any place that customers describe you in their own words, like reviews, referral language, support conversations, why they explain something is important to them. Pulling and compiling this isn't necessarily just like a 1-hour task. It's a little bit more involved with that, but it's not impossible to do, and it doesn't take you months long. It's not a months-long exercise to do this. You can use this data for a ton of other things besides just writing your value proposition. So it's not a wasted effort. It's not just to make work in order to get a value proposition. You can use it to create all kinds of different messaging, to understand what objections are that you need to overcome during the sales process, sales pitch decks, social campaigns, all kinds of different stuff. But this data is the only thing that gets you a value proposition that doesn't sound like everybody else's, and it's absolutely worth the effort to get it. So you go through and you write this amazing value proposition using all this juicy data from your customers, and it's going to be great until leadership or your boss or somebody else on a different team sees it, and then they want to add their 2 cents. Because everybody wants to add their 2 cents to the value proposition because it's such a great statement. Here's what happens. Someone might write something that's very sharp, very specific, very customer grounded, and adds that to the value proposition. And then it goes into review. And then suddenly it needs to mention the platform integration and the enterprise tier, and it needs to be more elevated and a little less edgy. And by the time it comes back, it sounds like a dumbass press release. No shade to anybody who writes press releases, but it's generic, it's boring, it doesn't mean anything. It's the millennial gray of copywriting. It's terrible. So here's how to protect the value proposition as you're actually creating it. You need to set the criteria before you write, not after. So agree up front on what the value proposition needs to do, the specific buyer it needs to address, the real outcome that you're looking to achieve, the customer language that should be included, and how it's unique to you. If you need to you should get agreement on those things up front. You can write that criteria down, and then when feedback comes in, you can run it against the criteria. And you can ask yourself, like, if we apply this feedback from so-and-so, does it make the value proposition more or less specific? Does it make it more or less unique? Does it still address the needs and the outcomes of that particular buyer? That's a much easier conversation to have than like, I really don't love the tone, which isn't helpful feedback. You need to ground every decision in customer data. Opinions are really hard to argue against. Customer quotes and data points are easy to argue against. You can say 3 out of 5 customers we interviewed used this exact phrase, and that ends the debate faster than any creative, I feel like, it seems like type of rationale. You need to separate the value proposition from the tagline conversation. These are, again, very different things with very different jobs. And if your leadership or a different team leader or somebody else in the group wants something more inspiring, you can offer develop a tagline alongside the value proposition, but not instead of it. Give them a lane that isn't your value proposition. And you can set a test period instead of, here's our new value proposition forever. You can frame it as, here's what we're testing for 90 days based on the customer data. That lowers the stakes, reduces the committee instinct, and then gives you real conversion data to defend against later. I'm going to give you 2 examples of hero section value propositions for small business accounting. It's kind of a very specific niche, but it's a really great, very competitive category. So the first up is FreshBooks. It says, small business software that makes the hard part easy. Great. It says who it's for, what they do, the expected outcome. It feels pretty good if you're a small business owner looking for a way to make running that business a lot easier. But it's not very specific, and it's not very unique. It's not very ownable. It's kind of like, okay, this could work. But then if you contrast it with Wave, they say what they do, who they're for, the outcome customers can expect, and this is unique. They have a value prop that's very specific, timely, because it is tax season right now when I'm recording this. And they've built in some voice of customer data in that subhead using words like panic and ready for anything that tax season throws at you. Those are phrases that they got from their customers. They're showing that they know their customers and the feelings around tax season. And again, they're illustrating that they know and identify what their customers or their prospective customers are going through. And sure, you know what, they may change this out in 90 days, but they're showing customers that they know what they want and how they help deliver that value better than anybody else. Because who doesn't want to avoid feelings of panic when it comes to taxes? That's big stakes if you get it wrong. So just to kind of wrap everything up, your value proposition isn't generic because of bad writing or even because you used a Mad Lib style framework to start writing it. That's a great place to start. But it's generic and meh because it was built by people who don't know your customers or didn't have any customer data and probably got steamrolled in the revision process. So if we want to do better by our value propositions, we need to make sure that we are naming the specific buyer and the real outcome using their words, not yours. 3 to 5 competitors could have the same value proposition. Start over. If you could swap it out for anybody else, you need to do better. You need to be a little bit more unique. And you can have more than one value proposition, company level, product line, buyer segment. It's okay as long as they are all under the same umbrella. And then establish the criteria before review, not during the writing process. Data ends any type of opinion, assumptions, feeling type of debate or based feedback. So we can all do better by our value propositions. I know that I also have room to work on mine, and it feels like it's in constant revision, but that's okay because As my business evolves and as my customers and my clients evolve, my value proposition should also evolve. So that's all the time that we have today for Free Marketing Fridays. Thanks for spending time with me today. If you want updates and notifications about these replays or any upcoming sessions, make sure you sign up at freemarketingfridays.com. And if you're watching this on the replay, please like, share, and comment if you found this helpful. Thanks so much.